You're tuned into TobiTalks, episode 21, From Bedside to Lung Transplant Coordinator. Sometimes in nursing, we can get really compartmentalized in our areas. And I have to remember that it takes a hospital to take care of one patient. Every single angle of the hospital, every person is a key player. And that even comes to coordination of care. I had no idea that transplant patients also have a coordinator who follow them throughout their whole life. And this episode actually resonates with me a lot because I knew of someone who had a transplant, but I had no idea what the whole case entailed. I had no idea that your care doesn't stop once you receive a transplant, but it continues until your end of life. I had the awesome opportunity of interviewing Latasha, who is a lung transplant coordinator, and she shares with me all the details of what it's like being in that role, how she was able to get into this role, how much the role pays, but really the impact she's bringing to families as a coordinator. You guys, I'm really excited about this interview, and it's so heartwarming because it really hits home for me, and it really opens my eyes to see the different dynamics nurses play in the hospital setting. So before I get all up in my feelings, let me go ahead and hop into this conversation. Girl, let's go ahead and hop into this. Tell me, how did you get into nursing and where are you now?
Okay, so I got into nursing probably because of my mom. So my mom's a nurse, and so is my grandmother. She's a nurse as well, so that's all I knew. So I didn't really have, they didn't pressure me, but I felt like I really didn't have an option. Like nursing was what I was going to do regardless. So I went to SFA and got into nursing school, and then I graduated from SFA in 2011, and then in 2015 I graduated with my master's from Preview. And so right now I'm in lung transplant coordinator position at Methodist Hospital in the medical center in Houston.
Oh wow! So when you shout out to SFA, by the way, that's where I started my first journey. So So when you said you went to Prairie View for your master's?
Yes.
Tell me about your master's and how you actually acquired your master's at Prairie View and what made you want to go back and get your master's.
So it actually started at SFA in my last semester of clinicals. One of my instructors kind of told me to look around the floor and to look at the nurses and like the older nurses. And I was like, okay, well, they look older. And she was like, but how do they really look? And I started laughing. And she was like, no, give me your honest opinion. I said, well, they kind of look tired. And she was just like, well, exactly. You can't spend your whole life at the bedside. Like you have to move around. So I had another mentor who was actually like a director at Nacogdoches Medical Center at the time. And I was like, oh man, I love her position. That's something I can do. So I kind of always had it in my mind to be some sort of like administrator of some sort. That's why I went to PV to do nursing administration.
Wow. So you pretty much before you even got out of nursing school, you were kind of told that, hey, if you don't want to do this for a long time, you start thinking about your master's program, correct?
Right. Yeah. So it was kind of on the forefront. Like I knew I wasn't going to jump into it immediately. Like I was the youngest person in my class with my master's, like no manager experience or anything. You literally the youngest one in there. And they're kind of like, are you sure this is what you want to do? And I was like, absolutely. I don't want to do it necessarily now, but I want to get it out the way. So when I'm ready, I can already have it. I don't have to worry about going back to school for it. So that was kind of my thought process.
Wow. So it kind of was like you were kind of just thrown into getting your master's already. You didn't really know if this position that you're working in now could have been something you could do with your BSN degree. Is that currently, did you get this role as a coordinator for transplant already when you were, before you had your bachelor's degree, or is it because of your master's degree is why you were able to get this opportunity?
No. So the position is offered to BSN nurses. So me just having my master's was just something extra. They really didn't help me get the position, although they do, they have different levels. So they have like coordinator 1, coordinator 2, and senior coordinator. And right now they're trying to switch the senior coordinator position to have masters only. So it kind of worked out in my favor because that's one of the goals I aspire to in the upcoming year or two. So that helped me out already. So I'm like, oh, well, I don't even have to worry about that because I already have it. So for the initial entry position, you don't need it. But to I guess, climb up the ladder, you will need it.
You will need it. But for the entry position as a transplant coordinator, you didn't really need that. So before we hop into actually going into full discussion about the nursing coordinator role, how long did you spend at the bedside before you actually transitioned to the nurse coordinator role?
So I only actually been into this role for about like a year and a half now. So I was at the bedside really for, I guess, like, I don't know, I've been a nurse like 7 years now. So like the 5 years. So initially I couldn't get a job back at home, which is in Houston. So I started off in Lufkin. I was like on the med-surg surgical floor. I was only there for like 6 months. And then I fell into transplant, which was not on purpose. It was actually on accident because I wanted to get into like a children's hospital. I ended up going to Herman, and I thought it was the children's hospital. They had a heart transplant unit. I thought it was with kids. So, of course, when I get to the interview, they're like, oh, it's adults. I was just like, this is not what I wanted. But anyway, I stayed in it. I wanted to be back at home. So that's how I fell into transplant. Then I actually transferred over to Methodist, and it was like a multi-organ transplant. But even still, like, I always wanted to do the NICU. Like, I felt that, like, in my heart more, well, kind of, because at first in nursing school, I didn't want to deal with kids at all until I was actually in the NICU clinicals. And then that's when I was like, oh, wow, I really like NICU. So I ended up getting into NICU. So I'm actually still doing that, like, on the side. I have, like, 2 jobs. So I do that, like, on the weekends still. And then because my daughter is about to get to school age, I really wanted to have, like, a Monday through Friday so I can actually be at home, pick her up, and do all that stuff. Because, you know, bedside nursing, I work night shift. Like, your days are backwards. You miss a lot of stuff. So I was like, I need something a little more normal.
Girl,
so that's how I kind of fell into it. Yeah.
That is the truth of why we do talk about all these various positions, because, you know, the 12-hour shift that was popping when we were fresh out of college, you know, ain't like that anymore when you have a family, when you have kids, when you have other things that you want to do during the day.
Right.
Wow. So you did bedside for a while. You fell into the transplant role. Now you are a nurse coordinator for the transplant position. So tell me more about that position. What is your everyday life like starting from like your hours to what you actually do?
Okay, so they tell you on paper that you work Monday through Friday, you know, 8 to 5. That's not really true because sometimes you come early, sometimes you leave like super late. So as a coordinator, I'm with post-mortem patients. So I'm dealing with the patients who just recently got transplanted or they're older lung transplants. And transplant patients or lung transplant patients, they generally have like a life expectancy after the transplant of like 3 to 5 years. So, and that's what they tell them to begin with. Of course, some people, like I have some patients that are like 12 years out. But, you know, you do have those patients who are only after a year, they pass away because of graft dysfunction. So basically, in my role, I get a certain number of patients. Like right now, I think I have like 65. It sounds like a lot, but it's okay. It's like 65 patients. And I basically like manage, for the most part, their care. So they get, if they're new, they have to get labs done weekly or like twice a week or every other week or once a month. So I basically kind of monitor their labs, review those results with the physician, any like chest x-rays. If they're sick, they're calling me. If they want to go out of town, they're calling me. And then I just review all that with the physician. So for the most part, like 3 days out the week, I'm in my desk and I'm kind of talking to them over the phone, like triaging. And then 2 days out the week, I'm actually in clinic. So that's when they will actually come. They have to do all their tests and they'll be seen with the physician. And then we also have on call. So not only do, you know, you have your Monday through Friday, there's some evenings where I have to be on call or like on the weekend where you have to be on call if there's some emergent transplant issue.
So in your role, is it just coordinating the care of the patient holistically with their transplant needs? Or is it after their transplant, you're following them until a certain period? Or how is that in a way? Kind of explain that to me.
So, there's different protocols. So depending on how far out they are, they have to see us so many times. So we manage that part, but we manage them basically for life. Like they stay with me until they pass away or until they decide to, you know, if they want to move and they want to switch centers, transplant centers. But it's a lifelong thing. So you really get close with the patient and, you know, you really become their family because they're trusting you, you know, so initially, of course, it's like medical, like I'm very straight to the point. Like I have to ask questions about, like their medications, make sure they're taking their anti-rejection medicines right. But at the same time, you get to learn them and like their family. So you get a really like a tight, close bond with them. So it's kind of hard, if they decide to leave or if they pass away, because it's kind of almost like, one of your family members passing away because if you've known them for so long.
Wow. So you're really vested in a lot of your patients. I mean, for you to know a patient all the way, like their whole life, pretty much their whole life when they get their transplant and then after, and that's a lot. So how do you deal with some of the patients that you might lose since you are kind of very close to them like family? How do you deal with that kind of events?
Well, I guess, honestly, I know that it's a part of life. So sometimes it's kind of like oh man, that's really sad, like, kind of moment. But you don't want to admit that you have patients that are like more special to you or your favorite patient. So when one of those favorite patients passed away, or maybe someone that I knew a little longer, it is tough because, you do get emotionally invested. But then you kind of have to realize too that, God gave them another opportunity, to extend their life. So if it wasn't for this transplant, someone else passing away to give them this lung, they probably wouldn't have experienced this 1 year plus or, 5 years plus with their family. So I'm more thankful that they had that opportunity to, live a little longer, because their life probably could have been cut short if they never got the transplant.
Wow. That is so true. I just never even thought of it in that kind of mannerism. So that's crazy. And I'm just so impressed by what you do. So when you were considering taking this role and you were leaving the bedside, did you have any apprehensions about leaving, or did you have any fear about taking on this role, which is almost really heavy emotionally, but also, lifelong with the attachments you have with these patients? What kind of apprehensions or fear did you have leaving bedside and going into this role?
Well, initially I was kind of like, okay, I guess it's kind of like, I'm laughing because it's almost like a little insecurity, because you want to be like, am I smart enough for this role? Like, these patients are really looking at me for everything. Like, do I actually know what I'm talking about to guide these people? And I have them like go astray. So I kind of had to like recheck myself. Like, okay, Tasha, you're smart. You know this stuff. Like, and if you don't know, tell them I don't know. Ask the physician, whatever they're, that's what they're there for. So that was kind of like one of my, like, okay, am I ready for this? Also, I would say, I feel like I didn't want to lose my nursing skills. Like, some people get so far removed from the bedside that you forget, like, oh, I forgot how to start an IV, or, oh, I forgot how to do this. And then when that situation comes up, you're like freaking out because you don't know what to do. And they're like, aren't you a nurse? So that was kind of one of my fears too. But this job does actually help me still keep some of my, most of my skills up. I wouldn't say we don't start IVs and all this stuff, but we still do a lot of random stuff that will help, that'll help me. And then that's probably another reason too why I have a PRN job at the bedside, because I still kind of want to, keep up with that and make sure I still have my skills, because, I don't know what can happen if I would ever have to transition back, or no telling, like if I get like a manager, director position, like I still want to be able to help my staff on the floor. So I kind of kept the other job on the side to make sure I'm still kind of up to par with my skills.
It's funny that you say that. I think that's a lot of apprehensions when leaving the bedside, is that we put so much emphasis on our skills. Oh, we're going to lose these skills. We're going to lose these skills, which to me, this is just my perception. I feel like there's such technical skills that we do, like starting an IV or inserting a catheter. And it's like a small little prep class or training. It's almost like when you learn how to ride a bike. You haven't ridden in a long time, and then you finally get on, you kind of get the groove of it, and then you can go. So I don't really feel like we lose those skills.
Right.
But another thing is, I feel like we put so much emphasis on those skills that we neglect the other skills of our critical thinking, our coordination, everything else that, things that we have to do when we're away from bedside. Those are also very important skills that you kind of lose when you're at the bedside, just doing, patient care. You don't have to think of the big picture. You don't have to think holistically and, coordinate their care outside of the hospital, because you're only focused on the technical skills of the bedside. So that's just my forte on it. I feel like every position has its own highlights of nursing skills, that we never really just lose our skills in general. But the hands-on one is what I definitely hear a lot of people saying when they kind of get what's the word? When they kind of get anxious about leaving the bedside, it's about those skills that they feel like they're going to
right.
lose. And I like how you threw it in there that, you know, for you not to lose those skills, you do still do a PRN job just to kind of keep you up and keep you up to date on those skills. So I love that you highlighted that because that's very, very true. So in this role that you're currently doing now, when you first started, did you have any kind of training? You know, like sometimes when you're going into another unit or going into ICU, they have like intense training for a couple of months or a couple of weeks. Did you have to have training for this role, or how did you prepare for this role?
Right. So, yeah, so I was definitely doing the orientation. It was probably maybe 6 weeks. It may have supposed to have been longer, but I kind of caught on pretty fast. So I was okay with going and messing up and asking for help. But I definitely had a preceptor, and so it's a little different. So I had to get used to that too, because first of all, I wasn't used to working days. You know, Monday through Friday is like day shifts. I was used to being, up at night. So I had to get over that struggle of waking up and then realizing that I had to be at work every day. I was like, I'm not used to this. I'm used to working today, working tomorrow, being off for 4 days. So that was kind of a struggle within itself. But yeah, so my preceptor, we basically went over a lot of protocols because we have to put in a lot of, I had to learn the computer. They have Epic. I wasn't familiar with it really at the time. We had to do a lot of orders, different protocols and how to chart this and how to call a patient and chart that and how to pull results and it was a lot of little detail stuff that, like you said, I guess when you're on the other end, on the bedside, you don't really pay attention because I don't need to know how to put an order in. I don't need to know who to call for certain tests or how to get certain results. So it was a lot of that type of stuff. And then slowly they gave me some of my, we split it up by alpha. So they gave me probably 15 patients at first to see if I can manage that. And then once I was okay with that, they started adding more until I got my full load.
Oh, wow.
So it was a gradual process.
Okay. Well, that's good. That's good that they were even provide you. I mean, that's a whole nother world compared to the bedside. So it's good to know that they prepared you with some kind of changes. So in this current role, what were some of your benefits? Like the schedule, obviously having a schedule where you can be able to take your child to school and Monday through Friday. And it sounds like there's a career advancement as well on top of you having your master. But what about salary? Was there an increase in your salary going from bedside to now in this clinical role where you're doing Monday through Friday? And feel free to share digits. And if you don't, it's okay. But this kind of want to hear about that. Did your salary improve or did you have to have a cutback a little bit?
So, no, I definitely didn't get a cutback at all. I worked a lot on the bedside, so I felt like I was almost stressing out more about money. So, I don't know I can't even think what my salary was when I was bedside.
It's never really consistent either when you're at bedside because you're doing overtime. You're trying to, so no one really. Yeah,
I had bonuses. So, yeah, so I'm really I don't know what it was, but now I'm making in the upper 80s. So that's definitely improvement. And then also we have call days, so I get more than that. So I'm doing well. So I'm not really complaining at all. And also when I advance in these certain coordinator positions, that comes with more money. So I believe the senior coordinators make well over 90,000, probably almost 100. They way up there. So I'm kind of I have my eyes okay, cool. I can just get past this first part, move on to coordinator 2, then I can, go up in advance.
Wow.
So it definitely helped financially. And also, the schedule Monday through Friday, you're off on holiday. So that's awesome because, usually you have to be, okay, what holiday do I want to pick that I have to work? Which one am I willing to sacrifice? You can actually, be off from that. So, that's good. I mean, it has its, its perks and its, downfalls, but nonetheless, the pay was definitely more consistent, and then able to be off on weekends and holidays. That's also a big plus.
That's really good. I'm so glad you're sharing that because a lot of people have this this notion that you can make the most at the bedside, and if you get away from bedside, then you're not making that much anymore. And it's that's not true. You want best of both worlds, where you can have a good pay and still enjoy your nights or your weekends or your holidays. Because I think that was the one thing I hated. Every year I got to figure out, do I want to give up Christmas or Thanksgiving? Do I want to give up Memorial Day? Or It was just really annoying. I was no, I want to enjoy all my holidays with my friends and family. So I like how you said that your role also has challenges. So do you mind talking about some of the challenges you do face as a nurse coordinator for the transplant?
Yeah, so definitely one of the probably biggest challenges is your patients, because they're people just like you. And sometimes like I said, I'm a post coordinator. On the pre side, they're saying yes to everything because they want to live. So they're, you're telling them like, oh, you're going to have to get labs done weekly. I'm going to have to see you every month. Your coordinator's going to call you twice a week. You have to do this, 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 and this. And they're like, oh, yes, I'll do everything. And then they get transplanted and they come to me and I'm like, okay, I need you to go get labs on Tuesday. And then I need you also to follow up on Thursday. And by the way, a lot of the medicine is really expensive. So we have issues with that. And they're kind of like, you're asking too much of me. Like, when can I breathe? When can I just sit down? And I'm like, what do you mean? This is go time. So, the initial stages when I get fresh transplant patients, that can be very challenging and very difficult because they don't understand. Sometimes they just want to, they feel like they got the lungs and they can just run free. And in a sense you can, but it's so critical their first year of life because they can die easily if the med dosing is off, if their range is off, like if they go into a crowd and someone has a regular cold or regular flu can be fine for me and you, but for a transplant patient, they can die from that. So, I don't want to scare my patients like, hey, I really need you to wear your mask, like your white blood cell count is low. I really need you to do this. And they do the opposite. And I'm like, why are you sick? And they're like, oh, Tasha, I'm so sorry. Like I did. Okay. We did this before. So that part is challenging. So you really have to learn how to speak to people and be firm, but also kind of, do it with love. Cause I don't want them to be like, I hate my coordinator. She sucks. Like she's so mean.
Yeah.
I want them to like love me. I want them to understand that like, I'm talking to you this way, or I'm trying to get this through to you because I want you to survive. So that's a challenging aspect. Also, the physicians. I mean, I think that's almost in like any nursing role because, you feel like you have your own authority and they feel like, I'm a physician. So it's kind of hard, especially when I was new, they didn't know me. So they didn't know what background I came from. They didn't know like how well I handled situations. So you have to gain like that trust so they can be like, oh, okay, Tasha, she's fine. I know if this patient starts, showing signs of rejection that she's going to catch it early and it won't be something that's caught late. And then they're all looking like, what happened? How do we miss this? So it's challenging with them too. And then also like, since I've been here, we had some physicians leave and some new physicians come. So that's hard too. So you have to, every physician has their own thought of how to handle transplant patients or their protocols or how they would treat certain things. So it's kind of like you have to learn what that physician would do. And then it's almost like you have to be a mind reader and like, don't mess up. Like, okay, let me try to think what this physician would say to this patient, and some give you more leeway to do stuff without them. And some want you to, show them everything and basically, kind of micromanage. So that's hard. So I would definitely say working with a physician can be kind of tough. And then obviously working with patients and all the different personalities is definitely challenging.
Wow. So what has your outlook been now that you're in this role as a coordinator versus when you were in a bedside as a nurse? What were some of your views on either or now that you've been on both sides? What are some of the differences that you see now that you're on the outside, being away from the bedside, not as much?
So I can do both. So with the patients, you have them for those few days and they go home. And I remember sometimes complaining like, oh my God, so-and-so was so annoying because they would just kept asking for this, asking for that or whatever.
Yeah.
Or I could be like, oh, they're so sweet. Like I wish they'll stay. So it's different now being on the other side because I have to talk to them all the time. So it's like, you can't be like, oh, let me get a break from so-and-so. Like there is no break. Like, and if you do get a break, then you feel bad because they probably passed away. So it's kind of like, so I really felt like I kind of like did some self-discovery and like tolerance because, not everybody you're going to like, you're not going to, be friends with everybody. You're not going to have the best relationship with all your patients, but you still have to be professional. You still have to get your thoughts across. So I definitely learned like better communication skills from that. And then as far as the physician goes on the floor, I really didn't have that much contact with them, hit or miss. Sometimes you call the physician on call at night because an order wasn't in for something or you get a new admin, but it wasn't, or admission, but it wasn't really personal. So now on the other side, like I see their, some of them, some physicians are more interactive than others, but you still see like their human side. Like I see them like when we're short and they have to round in 2 different places and they're running the clinic trying to do broncs and all this stuff. And you can see that they're tired. And we're like, hey, do you want them to eat? Like, you see the human side and you realize like, dang, okay, they are a doctor, but they're still like a regular man, husband, a father. They want to get out, at 5 like we do. And I don't want to call them because I know they don't want to answer because I know they're tired. So I see the other side. So it kind of makes you feel a little more compassionate towards them. And maybe that's why he popped off his mouth, because he was up all night because we had a new transplant and he didn't get to sleep and he has to be here at 8 just like us. So that kind of helped me see them in a new light that way.
Wow, that's such a good perspective. I think sometimes we miss that, I know when I first got into the administration role, working as a QI coordinator and then going into different specialties and risk management and stuff, I used to thought it was so easy, like boom, at the snap of a finger, like we can get things done. They're always telling us on the floor that management's making this decision. No one is incorporating the nurses. And then I'm a nurse and I'm now in this role and I'm like, whoa, it is way more than I thought. It was not as easy as it looked or as it sat or as it seemed.
Right.
I love how you gave that perspective, because we don't see that human side. Like you said, sometimes we'll call them on call. Sometimes they pop in, pop out. So we kind of don't see their perspective or, be in their shoes. And then sometimes we as nurses are always complaining like, oh, the doctor's this, the doctor's that. But, we lose that compassion sometimes when we're at the bedside, because it's like boom, 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 boom. Or you have so many patients and everybody's just trying to do as much as they can. And it's like, let's take a moment and just acknowledge each other. Like we're all human and we're all just trying to help a patient out, but we still have our lives. We still have things that we're going on and going on with us and vice versa. So I really am awed by what you do. Like that is just, it seems like a lot. Like I could not imagine knowing a patient for their whole life, because I feel like in my nursing career, I didn't have that opportunity. So with you having that kind of opportunity to do that in this kind of transplant role, with you having a really good schedule, it sounds like the salary is popping. What kind of advice would you give someone else who is interested in becoming a nurse coordinator for transplant? Like what kind of steps would you advise them to do to kind of get into this kind of role? Because you already said entry level, you only really need a BSN. So is there anything else that you would add to help someone get into this position that you're in now?
I do think one of the requirements is, of course, BSN, but I also think you have to have some sort of critical care experience. And I would only say that because you are, for the most part, you're managing their labs on your own. So you kind of have to know what's critical, what's not. You usually get like the arrow up and down if you forget, but still, like you kind of have to look for subtle things. Similar to like the patients in the ICU, like if they get septic, it's not always, something drastic that's going to spark your attention. It's the little subtle stuff like, oh, his blood pressure dropped a little lower than it normally is, or your temp is a little weird. Like, or you kind of have like a weird cough. Like you kind of have to use your critical thinking skills. So I would definitely suggest, dabbling in the ICU for a little bit, or even just being exposed to a transplant floor, just to see if that's something that you really want, because then you can differentiate which organs that you want to work with. Like I knew with certain organs that I didn't want no parts of. And it's just personal reasonings, but you can kind of get an idea of like which organ you think you will probably, you will want to actually deal with. And some I feel like are more difficult to handle than the others, like lung and heart. And then some of them like kidney, not saying it's an easier role, but they have longer life expectancy. So, that may not be you may not have to deal with death so often with them.
Wow.
But that's probably what I would really probably, because they live a long time. Like, and so with them, I don't know, their protocols are different than ours. So I don't know if they, after a certain point, they don't have to be seen anymore. Because their patients live 10 plus years, like all the time. It's like all the time. So, I'm not sure with them, but like I said, for us, ours is only 3 to 5. So kind of around that 3-year mark or 5-year mark, depending on how old the patient is, you kind of start to expect to see a decline, and that, it's not reversible at some point. But I really would probably suggest like the critical care experience or having some sort of exposure to transplant. Just
That's
so you
some
can
good
really,
advice.
get the idea of it. Yeah.
Yeah, that's some really good advice. And out of curiosity, in your role, do you still wear scrubs, or are you more of office clothing, like in a corporate sector? Like, what kind of style do you have to bring to work?
Yeah, so definitely, I think it's like mixed. Like in clinic, usually I wear scrubs because it's like a clinic setting. And then on the days that I'm not in clinic, I usually wear like business casual clothing, whereas some of my coworkers, they wear scrubs all the time. But I was kind of like, man, I want a job where I don't have to wear scrubs every day. So I was kind of excited to wear regular clothes.
I was
So
too.
it's a mix in between.
I was too, until you're like, dang, I gotta wear a lot of regular clothes. Like, you always gotta shop for like work. And then sometimes you just want to wear something that's free and loosey goosey and you can just throw it on and run out the door. I miss my scrub days. Like, the only time I wear anything scrub like is literally a lab coat because I'm doing audits and clinics and stuff like that. But I miss the days where I could just throw on comfortable scrubs and just go on about my day. So I'm glad to know that this role allows you to do both, to kind of cross over to, scrubs and, corporate like dress ups and stuff. Another question that kind of just popped into my head. Did you even know like roles like this existed when you were in nursing school? Because I know you said you went to SFA. I also did too. And I didn't. That's what I thought. Okay, go ahead.
Yeah, absolutely not. I did not know there was a such thing. I did not know. I had no idea. I didn't know about this role until I got to Methodist and I was on orientation on the transplant floor, and I saw this guy in his white coat, and he was in there talking to the patient. I thought he was actually like a physician or something. And I was like, oh, he was introducing himself. I was like, oh, what do you do? And he was like, I'm a transplant coordinator. He was actually a kidney transplant coordinator. And I was like, really? And he was just like, yeah. He was like, we manage their care outside of here, like all the outpatient stuff. And he told me that he actually had his master's in administration, and I guess he used to work at like Life Gift as a manager, but it wasn't what he wanted. So he ended up coming to Methodist and became a senior coordinator. He was like, yeah, you get, you have lots of free time. You're off on holidays. He was like, you have to take calls sometimes, but it's not that big of a deal. He was like, he was just talking about all like the highlights. And he was like, yeah, you have, autonomy. And he was like, yeah, you should definitely look into it if you've been here for a while. So he was the first one actually that planted the seed, because I was like, I didn't even know that was a thing.
Wow.
Like, I didn't know at all. So yeah, because I was like, I guess it makes sense though. Who does manage these people when they get out of the hospital?
Exactly.
But I never thought it was us.
Exactly. I feel like that's the missing piece in nursing school. We get so focused on bedside that you forget the holistic piece of it. And yes, sometimes we touch a little bit on it. And when I mean a little bit in the community classes and stuff like that. Because, they'll probably just make us do like a community project or a health fair or, work at the homeless shelter or canned food drive. And I feel like there's so much more to what nurses do than just that when it comes to community and other aspects. So I just wanted to know too, because I remember I did not hear about roles like this. And if you knew about this role, would you have been, let me see how I want to word it. If you knew about this role ahead of time, would you have gone back for your master's, or would you have taken your time before going back to school?
Oh no, I still would have went back to school anyway.
Oh, okay.
Only because that's just one of my goals that I wanted to have. Mm-hmm. Yeah, so it was kind of like, it is what it is. Like, honestly, now still I want to go back for my doctorate, but I'm kind of more so, now I have a child and I'm like, okay, I need to balance how I'm going to do school and work and have a kid this time. So I'm kind of like, teeter-totter. And plus, I don't want any more student loans, so I need somebody to pay for it. So that's why I'm kind of holding off on, like, the doctoral program. But, yeah, I was going to get my master's anyway. And I really just wanted to do it because I knew life was going to happen. And I was like, if this be the last degree that I get, I want to get it out the way, because I never know, especially how, like, nursing is changing, how they're trying to change, like, like the medical center to have all BSNs. And it was kind of rumors that, by 2020, they wanted, at Methodist at least, they wanted the managers and directors to have like their masters. And then so I'm like, okay, so if I aspire to be like a director or something, they're going to be looking at me like, where are your degrees at, if that's what it's turned into. So that's what I was kind of like, let me go ahead and do it now. Mm-hmm. And then, I'll just have it on the back burner and just be prepared for it later.
Wow, that's very true. I mean, that's a lot of information I think people sometimes aren't aware about, that a lot of hospitals or even pushing towards the magnet role where everyone needs to have their BSN and higher ups need to have a master's.
Yeah.
Because I know from travel nursing, I've met a couple of directors that literally only have their BSN, and they're like directors of a unit, and they didn't have to have their master's. It's just the experience and what they brought to the unit is what helped them get into that leadership role. But times are changing, and it's good that everyone knows that.
Right.
So Latasha, I definitely want to tell you so much how I appreciate you just shedding so much light on the topic today of a nurse coordinator, especially as a post-lung coordinator and what you do. And it just is so powerful. And I just want to thank you so much for what you're doing for all the patients out there, especially those who are getting different transplants, especially in the lung area, and how you're just being amazing as a coordinator. So before we end today's recording, would you love to share any kind of advice or any kind of upliftment or any kind of encouragement that anyone who's listening to this can definitely be inspired from hearing this?
I would definitely say that we as nurses, we make an impact. Sometimes you feel like that your voice doesn't matter, or, your patients aren't hearing you out, or the physicians aren't hearing you out. But the patients, they know when they have a good nurse. And now sometimes, most of the time it's not really because of, you start their IV on the first try. It's usually because of like your character. So I would just, say to everyone, just to make sure that, that you always try to be that smiling face. You always try to connect them to your patients on a personal level. If you have time, sit down, just talk to them, call them by their first name after you ask for permission, but like really get to know them, because no one wants to be in a hospital. No one wants to be sick. No one wants to be called a patient. So I would definitely just suggest like trying to connect on a deeper level and really getting to know your patients so they can really get to know you and feel that human side.
I hope you've enjoyed today's episode. There were so many gems dropped. And if you want to reach me or hit me up, feel free to contact me through my email at TobiTalks@TobiTalks.com. Again, that's TobiTalks@TobiTalks.com. Feel free to follow me on Instagram or slide me a DM. That's at Tobi.Talks. Again, IG, Tobi.Talks. I also got Twitter, like everybody else, so feel free to hit me up. And my Twitter is This Is TobiTalks. I look forward to talking to you guys very soon, and remember, I'm rooting for you, so go out there and be great. Till next time, talk to you later.